Alrighty, everyone, welcome back. It is Dreaded D, the infamous pirate captain protecting T-Fuel Island. Today we're going to get back into the debt ceiling and talk further as things have changed and shifted and try to guide and navigate what's going to be happening over the next 2 months or so. It's an important process to look at both sides. I'm neither Republican, Democrat. Just think of me as a neutral third party that's trying to observe both sides for what they are in the terms of finance. Just remember, this is not financial advice either. Please do your own research. Alrighty, let's get into this thing. Alrighty, so as of Thursday, the Senate voted 50 to 48 on an extension of the nation's debt limit, which is a temporary deal to increase the ceiling by $480 billion, which will hopefully get us to December 3rd. So it's just a temporary pit stop along the way. It doesn't actually solve anything. All this has done is really just, we're going to be back in this same vibe come December 3rd. We're basically going to just have an extension. And with that, the problem still looms over our head like a giant cloud. And as I mentioned in the previous video, we see both sides of the table, both Democrat and Republican, playing dirty politics, partisan politics, and not really focusing on the American people as a whole. It's very clear that they are both, on both sides, concerned about how they will look in 2022 in elections. They are very, very concerned about their image right now. And what this kind of raising of the debt ceiling will do to their political campaigns going forward, and what ammunition it will provide to one side of the party or the other side of the party. So it's like an eggshell walking thing, and it's very interesting to see that Mitch McConnell actually fostered and helped this extension here, coming from the Republican side, and that this deal is even on the table right now. But both sides generally agree that not raising the debt ceiling hurts Americans much more than raising the debt ceiling over, in a short time horizon. Obviously, raising the debt ceiling is going to hurt all Americans in the long term. And long term could be 6 months in this case, but it all varies now. So in the next few clips, we're going to be discussing legislative filibuster, nuclear option, and just get a gauge on both sides of the table, and how they're conveying themselves to the public. Whether that's the truth or not is to be determined, but it's good to hear from both sides, just to ground yourself in a good structure, to see what's happening on both sides of the table and what tactics are being utilized to sway the minds of the American people. So we'll start off first with Ted Cruz, and then we'll get to Chuck Schumer next.
Which brings us to our present crisis, the debt ceiling crisis. Our national debt is roughly $29 million, and yet Democrats want to add trillions more to that. How many trillions? We don't know. They're battling within their conference just how many trillions more to saddle this country, but it's going to be a lot. But you know the curious thing? This crisis is 100% manufactured by Democrats. Why is that? Because for the entirety of this Congress, Democrats have had complete 100% power to raise the debt ceiling anytime they wanted. How is that? Well, ordinarily in this body, the way legislation moves, it needs 60 votes to move. It's called the legislative filibuster. But there's an exception to that. It's a big exception. It's called budget reconciliation. It comes from the Budget Act of 1974. Under budget reconciliation, you only need 50 votes, not 60 votes. It's the biggest exception that exists to the filibuster rule. Democrats, unfortunately, have 50 votes in this body. They have a majority in the House, and they have the White House. That means Democrats using budget reconciliation, and it is clear, by the way, that you can raise the debt ceiling using budget reconciliation. Democrats could have raised the debt ceiling in January. They didn't. They could have raised the debt ceiling in February. They didn't. They could have raised it in March or April or May or June, July, August, September. They didn't. We're in October. Democrats could have raised the debt ceiling today. They didn't. They could have done it with only Democratic votes, and there was not a single thing Republicans could have done to stop them. They know that. They don't dispute that. So why are we facing a crisis? If for 10 months Democrats could have done this anytime they wanted, why didn't they? Well, because there are at least some Democrats who realize drowning the nation in debt and spending and taxes is not popular back home. The voters don't like it. And so instead, Majority Leader Schumer has not once, not twice, 3 times tried to move a legislative vehicle to raise the debt ceiling that requires 60 votes. He didn't have to do it. He could have done it using reconciliation, using only Democratic votes. He had total power to do that. But he didn't want to do that. He wanted to use it to move it forward in a way that required at least 10 Republicans to join with him. Why? There is one and only one reason for this. Mr. President, I would challenge any Senate Democrats to ask Majority Leader Schumer if there's any other reason he proffered for not doing what he could have done at any time, day or night. The only reason is to obscure accountability. The only reason is to blame some of that debt on Republicans, so that Senate Democrats could claim, hey, both parties did it. What the Democrats are doing right now is unprecedented. It is radical. And they know it and they're scared of it.
All right, so that was Ted Cruz from Texas arguing his point of view and his perspective on the situation. Now we're going to listen to Chuck Schumer and him argue his point and his perspective. And we're going to look for the similarities. And it is amazing to see these, just everything that's going on, as well as make sure in the next clip you monitor Joe Manchin, who's in the background, and all his very elaborate gestures that he makes throughout the video. So let's dive into that one next.
President, in a few moments, the Senate will pass an extension of the debt limit through early December, avoiding a first-ever Republican-manufactured default on the national debt. On Monday morning, I said we needed to pass a bill to address the debt limit by the end of the week, and that is exactly what we did. Republicans played a dangerous and risky partisan game, and I am glad that their brinksmanship did not work. For the good of America's families, for the good of our economy, Republicans must recognize in the future that they should approach fixing the debt limit in a bipartisan way. What is needed now is a long-term solution, so we don't go through this risky drama every few months. And we hope Republicans will join in enacting a long-term solution to the debt limit in December. We're ready to work with them. Leader McConnell and Senate Republicans insisted they wanted a solution to the debt ceiling, but said Democrats must raise it alone by going through a drawn-out, convoluted, and risky reconciliation process. That was simply unacceptable to my caucus. And yesterday, Senate Republicans finally realized that their obstruction was not going to work. I very much thank my Democratic colleagues for showing our unity in solving this Republican-manufactured crisis. Despite immense opposition from Leader McConnell and members of his conference, our caucus held together, and we pulled our country back from the cliff's edge that Republicans tried to push us over. This is a temporary but necessary and important fix. I appreciate that at the end of the day, we were able to raise the debt limit without a convoluted and unnecessary reconciliation process that until today, the Republican leader claimed was the only way to address the debt limit. Let me say that again. Today's vote is proof positive that the debt limit can be addressed without going through the reconciliation process, just as Democrats have been saying for months. The solution is for Republicans to either join us in raising the debt limit or stay out of the way and let Democrats address the debt limit ourselves. Those are the two choices, and it's very simple. Senate Democrats want a long-term solution to the debt limit to make sure financial markets remain stable and our economic recovery stays on track. America's full faith and credit must never be used as a political bargaining chip. I hope my Republican colleagues relent from trying to make it one when we revisit this issue soon. So now that Republican brinksmanship is relented, Senate Democrats will focus on passing Build Back Better agenda.
Now, whether you like one side or the other is beside the point. Both parties, if you listen to the video closely, both say in the exact words that it was this issue was manufactured by the opposing party, which just shows that both of them are pointing the finger at each other. Both of them are treating this as a political movement and playing it off as if it's the other side versus the other side. Both are solely at fault in this case, and it's not that one party is at more fault than the other. Obviously, the Democrats have spent a lot of money. Republicans also spent a lot of money. It's both sides. In the case of blame, it's bipartisan for sure. This political tactic game, though, does not do and suit well for the American people. It is what's doing best for each of their parties instead of looking out for the American people as a whole, which is unfortunate because raising of the debt ceiling, seems like the lesser of the evils. It's still evil, but by doing so, we push our citizens into more inflation, more challenges, more issues that are not going to be resolved by just raising the debt ceiling. We are at that point where we're at the split in the road. And we obviously, it seems that we can't take the pain. But for us in crypto, coming into December 3rd, supposedly that's going to be our blow off top month. And with all that going on, I do wonder how it's going to affect what could happen in Q4. Is there going to be some hesitancy, or are people going to capitalize on that hesitancy and make a lot of money because they understand that there's a mixed bag of fear mixed in with all that FOMO coming into Q4. And the path forward is super uncertain, but I think this can be a great teaching lesson in the process of it. And that's kind of the point of this series. And I know that most of the people that are listening right now, my true OG fan base here at my 30 subscribers, appreciate you all. You all understand all this, but these videos are trying to create a voice or a way that you can maybe pass these along to friends and family that are misguided or trying to seek direction, whether it's in crypto, finance, just the world in general, and they don't know how to view things, right? They don't know how to create the lens to create a thought process that garners wisdom and historical context to build off of. And I think that's essential for developing and becoming the person you're supposed to be, as well as being a functional member of society. Creating that thought process that isn't so simple to say, well, it's red team's fault or it's blue team's fault. It's, at least in my perspective, I grew up in a liberal town, and I, in a family that doesn't have those same views. But at the same time, though, I would listen to each and every single one of those people, and it's important to listen to all those friends and what they'd say at the fire pit or, at a party, because there's a lesson there. There's something to learn from that person, whether you agree with them or not. At the end of the day, though, I'm not going to stop being friends with a person because they hold a different political viewpoint than I do, and it can be detrimental to your own growth to not listen to these other viewpoints. Sometimes we fall into these groups in which as soon as someone says something, we trigger into a groupthink moment and we automatically change our view on how we see a person. And that is super detrimental to, especially in the investing world, because there's many, many people, and I've seen this happen over and over and over again with groups, that you fall so much into the story that you're not constantly checking up and validating for yourself whether that investment or where you've applied capital still holds true. So, people give me some shit sometimes because I nitpick a project, or I constantly am trying to break down and see through the veil in a way and see where maybe my viewpoint has fallen down. And that can be looked at in a certain light, but at the same time, I want to see if I've fallen into groupthink. Have I been sold so much on a story that I have fallen victim to my own thought process? And that constant checking and rechecking is what's going to develop your wisdom. It's going to develop your strengths and give you alpha in the market. And that's truly what we're after here. And the debt ceiling is a good example of this, is that you need to make, from both sides of the table, you need to make informed decisions based on what you think is right. Whether that's one side, whether it's the other side, whether you're straight down the middle. We're talking finance here, and finance to me is pretty cut and dry, and that's why I always enjoyed it, is that there's the reality of the numbers, and then there's the story that's being sold to people, and that comes from both sides of the aisle. So you have to determine for yourself where you stand in amongst that and how you're going to handle yourself in and amongst other people. And I'm going to finish up on these thoughts here. So I have two quotes here that are, I'm a big history buff. I'm a big believer that history, repeats itself, and when it doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. So it's this constant battle, a constant energy. Life in general is a constant energy from not just good versus evil, but a flow between worse to better and back to worse to better, but a constant almost uptick in the sustainability and the growth of the human race as we go. Yes, it's like ratcheting a strap, and you go forward and then you go back a lot. You go forward and you go back a lot, but each time you make a little bit of progress as you go forward. But it's a long and very very tedious process because it's over hundreds of years. And with that, these leaders from our history, from the origination of our nation, they understood that these problems may arise. These are people that think not only, and that's what I'm trying to convey to a lot of people, is you have to not just think in the next 10 years. You have to think in centuries if you really want to be a great thinker that can process and analyze a lot of these investments that are going to be moving at light speed, because they're going to change very rapidly. And you have to be on your toes and ready to transition with it. It's not going to be stagnant, and it's going to get faster and faster as we move, as Raoul Pal says, into the exponential age. So the first one is from John Adams, which if you haven't done a lot of history research, or I'd recommend the John Adams, they did a mini HBO series. Great HBO series. Enjoyed it very much. And just history in general is great. He says, "There's nothing I dread so much as a division of the Republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leaders and concerting measures in opposition to each other. This, in my humble apprehension, is to be dreaded as the greatest political evil under our Constitution." These things were thought about very early on in American history, as the Americans themselves divided themselves into two parties, in which they were then divided again after they were divided between the British as well as the colonizers. And it's the rehash of history, the constant going back and forth, and that's what occurs over and over and over again. Washington had the same thoughts along those lines in his farewell address. However, combinations or associations of the above description may now and then answer popular ends, they are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. And that just shows us what kind of, thought-provoking leaders these are. They're thinking in centuries. They're not even thinking in their own lifespan. They've thought well beyond that, and to create a better world for the people that were living at that time and thinking for the forward generations. And obviously, we have been blessed with many gifts, especially those that live in this nation. And just to show that they know how the minds of men work, and the minds of men haven't really changed, and power and the constant battle back and forth between good and evil hasn't changed that much. It's just added some technology to it. Basically, the world is still the same, the humans are still the same, and we've just added some tech stack to it. So I'll leave you on that thought, is that History is constantly rhyming as we proceed with some new toys along the way. So, all right, I hope some of you gained some value from this. I know this isn't my normal crypto spiel. Hopefully tomorrow I'll be able to dive into some new crypto stuff and hopefully be able to produce these more consistently as I kind of get the knack for it, and you guys give me more and more feedback. Look forward to hearing from you all. Alrighty, take care. I'll see you on T Fuel Island. Have a good evening.